Now, President Trump is facing a possible revolt among Senate Republicans over his decision to declare a national emergency at the southern border. Now, this is Politico, and they point out, that the emergency would take money from the military and disaster relief in order to build a section of the wall. And that is not going over well with Senate Republicans. Now, one Senate Republican in particular is Rand Paul. Now, Rand Paul has the ability to be on the right side of the issue at least 1% of the time, which is far more than most Republicans in the Senate. Now, Paul says, I'm going to vote against this. I don't agree with declaring a national emergency on the border because basically I don't want to spend any more money, right? He doesn't want to spend any more money, and he doesn't actually want more power to be invested in the executive branch. So again, that's fair, right? Now, these Republicans blocking that would mean that a resolution that does block that emergency declaration would lead Trump to issue his first veto. Now, that's interesting, right? Now, that is something Republican leadership doesn't want to happen. They don't want to face a veto threat. Now, I'm going to go to some Republicans who are talking to reporters, and this first one is John Kennedy. Now, he's expected to oppose a resolution of disapproval, but he hopes that this makes Trump think about the declaration. I got news for you. I don't think that's going to happen. Donald Trump, once he makes up his mind, he is not going to change his mind. It is made up. Now, he told CNN State of the Union, quote, I do think he's probably rethinking the situation. Obviously, you do not know Trump the way that most people know Trump. But it adds, I don't think the president has the votes on a straight-up vote to sustain his position. Now, if the Senate says, Mr. President, you don't have the authority, as the House did, I expect the president to veto it, and we will be right back to where we are now. Which is basically Donald Trump trying and failing to get part of his wall through Congress. And the House has shown that they are not willing to do that. And I think that's great. Now, Senator Lamar Alexander also weighed in here. He actually publicly urged Trump to back down and called on the president to reverse the emergency declaration and instead use the transfer authorities that are already granted to him to find money for that wall. He said, there is a time for the president's lawyers to take another look and determine whether we can both build the 234 miles of border wall that the president has requested and avoid this dangerous precedent. So, Republicans, they're in a bit of a political bind here, right? Now, for one, they don't want Trump to veto, right? Because that actually looks bad overall for the Republican Party. But the real issue, and they mention this, is the precedent, right? So if Donald Trump gets the funding for his wall through an emergency declaration, for his, what is a non-emergency emergency? And let's be honest, there's no emergency at the border other than, of course, the fact that we have a lot of refugees. We have a lot of refugees and asylum seekers that are being basically deadlocked at the border. We need more immigration judges, and we need to be able to process these people's claims to determine who should be able to get into the United States and who shouldn't. That is the actual emergency at the border. What is not an emergency is people plowing through to get into the country, MS-13, gang members, and drugs. That is not the emergency because that's not actually happening. But now, on the emergency thing, though, if he does do this, it sets a dangerous precedent for Republicans. Because what's to stop President Bernie Sanders, for example, from declaring a national emergency to combat gun violence or climate change? Now, look, climate change is a real emergency. Gun violence is a real emergency. But if you do that, Republican heads would explode. And so here they do that. They're wanting to President Trump to back down because they're like, dude, don't give the Democrats ideas. We've got this surging left wing that wants to do all these really, big things, don't give him the power to be able to do that. Don't give him the precedent. So just stop. But Republicans, basically what they want is they want their cake and they want to eat it too, because they want to make sure that they please their base. Alexander said, quote, Trump should find a way to let Republicans who want to support him on border security to be able to do that while also keeping our oath to the Constitution. It's a bit of a fine line they're walking, right? Because again, they want the wall to keep their voters happy, but they also want to make sure that a Democratic president can't use that same authority to bypass Congress. So, here you go, right? Now, Paul, by the way, who joins 3 other Senate Republicans so far in publicly backing the resolution of disapproval, said he couldn't support giving a president extra constitutional powers. He said, I can't vote to give the president the power to spend money that hasn't been appropriated by Congress. We may want more money for border security, but Congress didn't authorize it. If we take away those checks and balances, it is a dangerous thing. And so Rand Paul is at least consistent on that issue. Now, in addition to Paul, you have Suzanne Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Tom Tillis also saying they will join all 47 members of the Democratic caucus in supporting a resolution that blocks the emergency declaration. So, look, there's about a dozen GOP senators also on the fence. So that could leave open the possibility that they could pick up more Republican votes on the Democratic side. So who knows, right? And they're also privately discussing if they can make changes to the resolution of disapproval. In fact, one of those changes is from Ron Johnson. He said, I want to express support for better borders, better border security. If we can find a way to do that in a resolution, that would be a good thing. And it would also be a good thing for them politically. So what's funny is they're thinking about 2020 now. And I think they're worried. Why? It's because Donald Trump is deeply unpopular among the American people. Now, he's very, very popular among Republicans. He's the leader that they all want. 93% of Republicans have a favorable opinion of him, which means that the majority of America does not have a favorable opinion and does not agree with the Republicans. So now it's funny, though, that now they're going after executive power. When back during the Bush years, the Republicans and some Democrats as well were okay with giving the president more executive powers in order to do things like wars. And they gave Obama powers as well. So now they're like, reel it back, because now you have a madman in charge. And that madman is setting terrible precedent. And they're afraid that he will lose and that the other side will end up with that precedent. So that's the situation. It is interesting. There is a revolt coming, but we'll see if they actually follow through. Because with the Republicans, they are authoritarians, so you never know. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.